A major change in leadership was announced at Apple yesterday. Tim Cook will step down as CEO nearly 15 years after he succeeded co-founder Steve Jobs. He'll become the executive chairman of Apple's board of directors. Replacing him will be John Ternus, a 25-year Apple veteran who's currently a senior vice president of hardware engineering. Tech journalist Patrick McGee joins us now. He's a CBS News contributor and author of the New York Times bestseller Apple in China. Good morning and welcome. Let's start with Tim Cook. How will his time as Apple's chief executive be remembered? Because if you look at the stock price alone during his tenure, he appears to be ending with flying colors.
Yes, I once calculated when Apple became worth $3 trillion that Apple market cap, its value in the stock market, had added $700 million per day in his, at the time, 11-year tenure. It's been several years since, and it's now added another $1 trillion. I don't think there's a shareholder on the planet who's disappointed by Tim Cook. That's the good. The bad, as I argue in my book, is that he also consolidated all of Apple's operations into China, which through no fault of Apple's became America's peer adversary on the world stage. I think that's going to be more and more deeply problematic with time. The ugly, I would say, is that this is a guy who was not a product visionary in the vein of Steve Jobs. To be fair, nobody is, but Apple went 10 years building a car that never reached the prototype level. The Vision Pro, a $3,500 spatial computing headset, was a pretty big marketing flop, or just product flop in general. And there are just a host of other reasons why, you just sort of get the feeling that Apple's lost its innovative edge. Where is Apple in the world of AI versus Claude versus ChatGPT versus all these other rivals? It seems to be sort of nowhere.
Yeah, we'll jump into AI in just a moment, but it seems as though it's difficult to predict how any CEO will perform with global forces and the like at play. So then what is your prediction for John Ternus? Who is he? Some folks online are noting how slim his LinkedIn profile is compared to Tim Cook. Does that mean anything? And what do you expect from him?
Yeah, John Ternus, this guy's 50 years old. Half of his life, quite literally, has been spent at Apple. He's a virtual unknown outside of the Apple fandom universe. But within Apple, he's very well known. This is quite an influential figure. No one's going to doubt that he knows Apple's culture inside out, that he is a formidable tech person, and so forth. I would say you've just honed in on the big unknown. Does he have the diplomatic chops that are necessary? If you're the Apple CEO, you are also a diplomat. You are a statesman. You're dealing with Brussels. Most of all, you're dealing with Beijing, and right now you, of course, are dealing with Trump. Tim Cook, I've got different thoughts on what I think about that, but on the whole, I think people would give him an A grade for that. And frankly, that is the value of Tim Cook remaining as executive chairman, or I'd say remaining at Apple, becoming executive chairman. He can do a lot of hand-holding with John Ternus on the world stage to get him up to speed, essentially.
And I wonder if that's the expectation, considering, Cook's profile. President Trump had famously called him Tim Apple. Cook got a lot of criticism for being at the inauguration and being quite close to President Trump. So do you expect that Ternus will look to Cook to kind of stay at the forefront, or perhaps try to reshape the company in his vision?
Look, to be fair, let's say, when Tim Cook became CEO at the death of Steve Jobs in 2011, he was not someone that had any diplomatic experience.
That's right.
And so, John Ternus doesn't have that either. And I would say it's just a big known. I don't think any journalist, really anyone even inside of Apple, has any evidence to say this way or that way that John Ternus has it in him to be a great statesman. So he's going to be having to learn from Tim Cook on the job, and we'll see how that plays out. But we're talking about a position that hasn't even, or a transition that hasn't even taken place. It won't take place till September. So I don't know where one would be optimistic or pessimistic on that. It's one of his biggest unknowns.
And in the last few seconds, where does Apple stand in the AI race?
Gosh, it is possible that Apple, by withholding, sort of staying back and not spending tens of billions, hundreds of billions in some cases, on data centers, may end up being a sort of triumph. But I think they need to displace Siri as quickly as possible. Siri is basically a laughingstock versus what's possible at OpenAI or Anthropic, or frankly, 4 or 5 other competitors. So, I think Apple needs to recognize that its power is the ecosystem. It should depend on its suppliers as much as possible, and that means rest in peace, Siri.
Yeah, anytime I've activated Siri, it's been by mistake. Patrick McGee, great to chat with you. We appreciate you getting up early, joining us from San Francisco.
Thank you, Errol.